Hi, Grisel.
Hi, Tevi. Thanks everyone for joining us on our little pilot recording of our first episode of our brand new podcast, which the name, did we arrive at a conclusion on the name yet, Tevi?
I believe so. The Upstart, right?
Upstart, Upstart. Tell us a little bit about why that's the name of this podcast, video
S-
podcast.
So yeah, the name came about because we were brainstorming for literally weeks, I mean, not if not months, trying to find something that a lot of people can relate to because I think we both come from the entrepreneur coaching startup, you know, uh, environment, and we're trying to find a word or a, a title for this podcast that would catch the attention of the audience that we're targeting with this content, which is mostly people who are entrepreneurs and are looking into the coaching side of things and maybe other type of entrepreneurial ventures, but the type of people that are seeking the type of information that will help them get started with their new venture. So
Mm-hmm.
that's pretty much how we came up with the name. I guess the startup life, the upstart. So I kind of had a ring to it. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it works. I think it works for what we're doing. And to your point about the audience that we're speaking to and the topics that we're gonna get into. So when we're starting a business, and especially in that startup phase, but even after the startup phase, there definitely is an emotional component. There is a personal development component that a lot of times we don't talk about,
Yes.
but it is essential to our success. It is the underlying factor to our confidence, our ability to put ourselves out there, promote the services that we're talking about, and to be seen as someone that is capable of helping people overcome the challenges that they're experiencing, right?
Absolutely. Yes.
We all come with a past. We've all had experiences in our past. Some of those experiences are positive experiences, some of them aren't so positive. And as far as the being in the startup phase and putting ourselves out there, sometimes we're putting ourselves out there for the first time, and we're
Yes,
talking about our
absolutely.
right, and we're talking about our expertise for the first time, and we're out there on stage essentially, right?
Yes.
and
Yes.
and so whatever is hidden under the rug from the past sometimes creates a barrier for us to be able to do that effectively and to do it with confidence, right? And so those topics are the ones that we're aiming to focus in on in this podcast, in addition to some other strategic conversations that no doubt will come up. But really, because of your background and mine, what we want to do here is to talk about that emotional component that
Yes.
is part and parcel to our success as business owners.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like to me, we all go after whatever our goals are, aspirations, what we're hoping to accomplish, and we look at it as business ventures or business ideas or stuff like that, or career. But ultimately, to me, it's always been about the person, right?
Mhm.
It's about the person. It's about your own sense of fulfillment, belonging, your needs being met. It's always been about the person. So to me, it's impossible to talk about a business venture without talking about the person that is, you know, putting their foot forward, trying to develop that new concept or that new business idea. So, kind of to segue into how did we come up with this idea of doing this podcast, if we can talk a little bit about our backgrounds, why does this matter to us individually, and what we're hoping to accomplish by having these discussions. So, I guess I'll have you go first. Just kind of tell us a little bit about you and what you're about and why are you so passionate about this subject?
Yeah, thank you for that. So I am in the space of work-life fulfillment. Work is an essential component to our lives. It's how we earn our income, and it's how we keep a roof over our head. It's how we keep food on the table. It's how we, meet not only meet our basic needs, but it allows us to actually live our life, right? And uh some people are in survival mode when it comes to their career or the way that they earn their income. And some people are in a state of flow where they love what they're doing and they're earning an income that they feel good about, and they're able to enjoy the other parts of their life when they're not working, right? And so that's the space that I help people to step into, is that space of, yes, I work and I earn an income, but that doesn't encompass the entirety of my life. I'm able to earn my income in a way that is enjoyable to me. I feel fulfilled doing that work, and it allows me to be present for the other parts of my life that doesn't involve work, right? So in one way or another, that has been the space that my entire career has been in. Now I am laser focused on that, and that's what I do. So I have been, for the last few years, working as a career coach for mid-career professionals that are at a crossroads, and I help them find what is the direction that you want to take your career into. Being an independent business owner for the last few years, I have learned, through trial and error, through a lot of coaching, through a lot of experimentation, what works and what doesn't work when you're out here being an independent business owner, right? So now,
Yes.
in addition to that career coaching component with that audience, I'm also helping coaches, consultants, digital creators, service providers who are fresh into this space of stepping out onto their own, hanging their own shingle. What does it take for you to have a business, have it grow successfully so that it doesn't take over your life? Because if we aren't careful, it can take over your life. And I'm speaking from
Absolutely.
experience on that, right?
Yes. I'll second that.
So having gone through that work, I myself have bumped up against some some personal things that have impeded my success. Some things that I had no choice but to go back and look at them and understand them and deal with them so that I can, come to terms with it and let that stop being a barrier for me.
Mhm.
And then thanks to you, I have firsthand experience with the work that you're doing now, because you really helped me to overcome some of those things that were holding me back. So enough about me. Talk a little bit more. I'll let you share the work that you're doing now.
Very good. Thank you. So yes, again, my name is Tevi Lawson. I recently published a book titled The Proxy Diet, The Practical Guide to Self-Analysis and Healing. I guess I should have added emotional healing to that title to make it a little clearer, but I'm sure when you read it, you figure it out. So basically, I mean, I have a pretty, eclectic background. I spent many years in marketing. I used to run I still kind of like I own a marketing agency. And I had a pivot around COVID. I got into real estate, which I did successfully. Uh, I had a moment in my life where it was almost like an epiphany, where it was like, okay, every year, you know how at the beginning of the year you set goals for yourself, right? Based on how well you did or didn't do last year and the things that you like to see happen the next year. So I've always made a point ever since I started my own company, which was 15 years ago at this point, because it was a big risk. I had a decent job, and one day I decided, you know what, I'm gonna walk away from this great job. I learned enough. I want to do things on my own and do it my way. So it was a big decision walking away from steady income in an industry that was booming at the time, the tech industry. And I decided to kind of take matters in my own hand, right? Because I felt like how we were doing things, I believe it could be done in a certain way and
Mm-hmm.
better, right? So that was my challenge. You know, I figured I couldn't, I may not be able to do it at a scale that my previous employer were doing it, but I could find my own niche and do it my way in a way that I believe it could be done. And so every year I'll give myself these goals and benchmarks and things that I believe that if I can just reach that point, that I'll feel like I'm getting somewhere, right? And every year I set these goals and I pushed myself and I did better every year. But for some reason, I did not feel good about myself. I felt like I was not good. I was not doing enough. I felt like somehow, even if I made more money, it was not enough, right? So the amount of money that I used to dream about when I started my business, I made more than that, but then it felt like I did not make enough. So every year I would set goals to make exponentially more than what I did last year. And I got into this basically cycle of keep kicking the ball forward and telling myself that I was not doing enough, right? And it got to the point where I was like, wait a minute, why am I even doing this? Because I spend my whole life chasing these goals that I'm setting for myself. Even when I do things successfully, I don't take the time to celebrate my wins. At the end of the year, it's like, yeah, I did all right, but I'm not quite there yet, right? And one day I kind of had like an epiphany. Like, I was like, wait a minute, this is not how it's supposed to feel like.
Mm-hmm.
I'm supposed to be enjoying my life, right? Because I'm working so I can, afford to do things in life and be happy and all the good stuff. So, but I felt like I was very unhappy and I was stressed out all the time. And I was really hard on myself. I always believed that I could have done better. I should have done better. And it got to the point where I was like, okay, what is the mission really? Like, is the mission to always wake up and tell myself that I should do more? Or is the mission to give myself a way to actually live a fulfilling life and feel good in my life, feel good in my own skin, feel safe and, feel like I'm living a decent life? And I realized I completely missed the point. All these years I was running, but I was not focusing on myself and my own sense of satisfaction, really, in life. Because I kept thinking, and I see a lot of entrepreneurs make this mistake, is that you keep pushing yourself, saying one day I will enjoy the
Mm-hmm.
fruit of my labor. One day I'll start to, allow myself to be happy doing what I'm doing. And I realized that the way I felt had nothing to do with my work. It had absolutely nothing to do with the amount of money that I was making because I was doing just fine. I just didn't have it in me to admit that I was doing okay. I just had this mechanism that I had to keep pushing myself.
Mm-hmm.
So, and actually, that ended up slowing me down because when you get burnt out, you cannot give as much. Right? So that's when I realized one day I was like, wait a minute, I'm getting burnt out and I'm not as enthusiastic. I'm not as excited about what I'm doing because I'm missing the point.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the subject, right? I'm the person. Basically, this is my story, but I feel like I completely erased myself from the story and made it about the business and the hustle and all that stuff. So that's was the beginning of my kind of self-analysis journey. I mean, I've always been into introspective kind of work. I've done a lot of research in many avenues around the subject, but I had a moment where I just had to stop. It's like I hit a wall. I couldn't keep going. I feel like I was lying to myself. I feel like I was robbing myself of something. So whatever I did didn't feel like I had it had any it had much substance. I was just going through the motions and just counting, okay, this year I'm almost hitting my goals, whatever that, the income or the revenue I was trying to generate that year. And I felt like I was not being authentic to myself. So fast forward to now, yes, there was a time where, different things happening in my life and, with my family and everything, I just decided, you know what? I think I need to focus a little more on the person and the people in my life versus chasing after these goals. And I think that's been the subjects of a lot of the discussions that we've been having, where we all get sucked in this into these career focused, um, almost like a race, where we never take the time to look at ourselves and say, how are we doing? Like, how am I doing? So I
Yeah.
guess to kind of sum it up, that's my motivation in having these discussions. So that everybody out there that is out trying to accomplish all these goals understand that you are the subject, understand that you are the mission, and everything else is a result of how you treat yourself.
Yeah, I think that what you're talking about, I resonate deeply with it. And I know that people listening will too, if we recognize one of the plights of being a high achiever. I think that when people step out of the security of a full-time job to run their own
Yes.
business full time, right?
Yeah.
They do it because there is a level of self confidence, right? Like an understanding that I can do a lot of things and I have a strong work ethic and I am able to organize my time and I'm able to create my own structure. And I see what, to your point, how what my employer was doing and how things were operating, but I have a skill set where I think that things could be done in a better way, which I totally
Mhm.
resonate with that part of the story too, because that is very similar to how I stepped out of my full-time job back in 2020 and stepped into my consulting business full time. I had what I felt was a better way of doing it, a unique way of doing things, and I wanted to have the autonomy and the freedom to do that myself, my way, right?
Yes. Yes.
And there is that thing that happens that it's like, okay, now I've stepped out to do this thing, which somehow translates into being this thing, right? And that thing takes on our identity, becomes part of that. And then it's like, okay, well, I took the risk of stepping out of that security, that comfort, that uncomfortable comfort zone of that secure paycheck, right? And now I'm going to do things
Exactly.
on my own,
Exactly.
right?
Yes.
And I'm going to prove to myself and to everybody else that I am all these things, and that I can do this and that I can be successful, that we really run the risk of losing ourselves in the process and working ourselves into the ground.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I was thinking about as you were talking was a couple of things. uh Number one is coming back to, or at least creating our own, what is our definition of success?
Yes.
I think that's a
Yes.
step that we skip over. What is our definition of success? When people step out to run their own business full time, there are things in their mind that they want, right? Like you want your autonomy, you want to be in full control, you want to earn an income and not completely deplete your savings account or go into debt, right? You want
Mm-hmm.
to create your own schedule. You want to have time to do the other things in your life that you want to do, right? Like think about those things, we want those things. I think taking a moment to look at what it is, what are the reasons why we stepped out in the first place, and what you actually want, and then creating your own definition of success, I
Yes.
think is a step that a lot of people miss. I know I missed it
Yes.
when I was first
Yes.
starting out. What is that definition of success? You know, there's a financial component, perhaps, there is a lifestyle component, perhaps there's an autonomy component, but what is that? And if we know that, then we can step back and take a look at what our life looks like and what we look like, and see that, okay, maybe not everything is perfect, especially at the beginning when we're learning all the things,
Mm-hmm.
but I am living my definition of success. Am I or am I not? Right? Like, and just have something to measure against. I think that's something that's really important that sometimes people miss.
Absolutely. And I think, just like you said, I think before you make that step, I think people need to take the time to actually do this self-analysis. Why am I taking this step? Am I
Yes.
doing this because I think I can make more money than I'm making with my employer? Am I doing this because I need to spend more time with my family? Am I doing it because I need to prove something that I'm smarter or I'm better than, whoever was employing me? You have to understand, why is it exactly that you want to take that step? Because I think when you become an entrepreneur, there's so many things on your table that you forget why you started this journey to begin with, because things just keep coming at you. So if you don't take that time, people take their time to do the business plan and go talk to the bank and the lawyers and accountants and stuff like that. But people do not do that self-reflection. It's like, okay, why exactly do I want to be an entrepreneur? Because it's not the easiest thing in the world. And I believe that if if you can talk some people out of it, you should. Because one, it's not for everyone. And two, if you don't know what you're getting yourself into, things can go sour really quickly.
Mhm.
So I believe that along with everything else you're doing as far as legal and finance and everything, I think that people should take the time and just sit down and do some self-reflection.
Mhm.
Why do I want to do this? Why? So that when things start to get tough, you know what the mission was at the beginning, and you keep asking yourself, is this still worth it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There is this enormous, and I know that I'm speaking to the choir here, but there is an enormous learning curve that you have to scale in that first year to 3 to 5 years. An enormous learning curve, especially in that first year, right? Because it's not
Yes.
just a matter of, all right, I'm going to step out and I'm going to do this thing that I know that I'm good at. Rarely do you get to do just that, right? Unless
Exactly.
you have a bunch of resources already in place
Exactly.
to take
Partnerships
care of
and stuff like that. Yes.
everything else. When you step out, you're wearing all of the hats.
Yeah.
And it's not just that one thing that you're doing that you're good at, right? Like your expertise or your skill set. There is the marketing component, there is the sales component, there is
Sales.
the visibility component, there is the networking component, there's the bookkeeping component, the accounting component, there's the website, there's the sales enablement material, there's
Legal.
legal, there's all of these things that
Yes.
all go into it. And especially in the beginning, that thing that you stepped out to do is a very small component of what you're actually doing. And
Yes.
it can be incredibly overwhelming unless you know why, unless you're very, very in touch with your why. Why did I step out to do this in the first place?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And I think it's because of that too. That again is a piece that I think people overlook, sadly. And it, I think, is what contributes to businesses failing. I looked recently at a statistic that said that it was from the International Coaching Federation
Yeah.
that 87% of coaching businesses fail within the first 2 years,
Yes.
and they close altogether. 87%.
Yes.
That means that somewhere around 15% survive that
Yeah.
first 2 years, right? And I really, to your point, that first step,
Yes.
the why, if we're not in touch with that, we can very quickly become overwhelmed with everything else that goes into doing this.
Yes, absolutely. And if you don't get a clear sense of that why, you may actually end up working against yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, when you become an entrepreneur, things are coming at you fast.
Yeah.
And when it gets overwhelming, you start to look left and right for something to blame, right? Why are things not working out? Maybe it's my market that's not working out. Maybe it's that secretary that's not doing her job right. Maybe it's my family is taking up too much of my time. Maybe, maybe it's the education that I got that didn't train me enough for this. So you start to look around for why is it that things are not working out the way you expected to? And if you're not in tune with your own sense of balance and your own sense of identity, you may quickly turn against yourself and say, this must be something that I'm doing wrong. Maybe I'm not smart enough. Maybe I should have, and you start to get into this, you know, downward spiral of self-criticism,
Yeah.
right? Because I've gone through that, over a certain period of time where I was very critical of myself, right? Even when we did great with certain projects, I go back and look at it. It's like, I don't know. I should have. Because you constantly checking whether or not you're doing as well as you thought you would be doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if that's not looking the way you expect, then somehow you start to turn against yourself.
Yeah. Uh, uh,
And in a lot of cases, you're just lacking the information, like these discussions that we're having, just to understand, okay, it's not just you. It's not that you did anything wrong. This is the process. Maybe you kind of overlooked certain things, but you'll be all right, you
yeah.
know?
Yeah. So, right. So there, one of, you're making an important point here about expectations. I think that sometimes expectations are not realistic when people step out. In fact, my book that I wrote, it's called Trust Your Wings: How I Left My Corporate Job to Start My Consulting and Coaching Business from Scratch. The whole reason why I wrote that book, which documents my first year as an
Mm-hmm.
independent business owner, the reason why I wrote that is to a point that you made earlier about um our expectations. My expectations were not, where they were not realistic.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, like, I wasn't grasping the full picture of what it meant to be an entrepreneur. I had some ideas about what all goes into it, and I had that that self-reliance, which I still have, but that confidence in my work ethic and my ability to see challenges, work through them, and have a growth mindset to overcome them. Thankfully, I had done the why part years before I started my own business. Thankfully I did that. Not a lot of people do. However, I needed more, right? Like, I needed more so that my expectations would be in the right place. And you said entrepreneurship is not for everyone, and if you could talk somebody out of it, then you should, right? Because it's a lot more than you bargained for, right? And that was the whole reason why I wrote that book, because I thought I had my expectations in the right place. I thought that they were realistic, but man, they weren't. And so I wrote that book to show these are the challenges that I experienced in that first year, and they were challenges. Okay.
Yeah.
This is what I tried and worked. This is what I tried and didn't work. And when they didn't work, this is what I did to keep moving forward. But you need to know, if you're considering doing this, you need to know that my first year was not very different from the first year that other people in my network that are coaches and consultants, what they experience in that first year. It is a hell of a doozy. And it is, again, scaling a learning curve that I didn't realize just how steep that learning curve was going to be. And if you don't have your expectations in a place that is realistic, that's enough to overwhelm you and just say, okay, you know what? No, I'm not going to do this. Right. So that's
Yes.
one thing that I was thinking about as you were talking. And I think the other part that's really important that I see people overlooking is embracing the journey of it. When you
Yes.
were talking about how every year you make goals and you try to do better than how you did last year, and we're always like climbing and striving to do better every year and all of that. And it's like, if I reach that goal, then the question is, all right, well, what's next? Right? Like achieving that goal just isn't enough. It's always like, all right, well, what's the next thing going to be? And I think that's something that is common with a lot of high achievers as well. And
Mm-hmm.
and one of the things that we as business owners, as entrepreneurs, have to learn to embrace is the journey that we're going through. And which
Yes.
which goes back to that definition of success, right? Like, what is your reason why you wanted to do this? What is your definition of success? Now understand that you are in a journey where you are growing. You are growing not only as a business owner, but
Yes.
as a human being. You're
Exactly.
growing. And you have to see that, and you have
Exactly.
to appreciate that in order to keep on going.
Yes. That's, I'm glad you said that. Because like we're talking when we say entrepreneurs, right? We're just, I guess basically we're indirectly saying first time entrepreneurs, right? Because there are entrepreneurs that this is not their first round, right? And they learn certain things along the way, right? So, like for example, there are some mature, I wouldn't say old, but more mature folks that would brag and say, if you take it all away, I'll build it back up in the next 6 months. And they say this with confidence. Why? Because when you've been a business owner and entrepreneur for a long time, just like you were saying, it's not really about your business anymore. It's about the person that you've become in the process, right? That means if you take the business away, the person that you are is capable of rebuilding just like that. But it takes what it takes to get to that level. A lot of people don't survive it because I think a lot of first time entrepreneurs, they get into it with the ideal, like the image of a successful business person. I'm a business owner now. I'm expected to live a certain way. I'm expected to be able to do certain things. I'm expected. Now, without that experience, and if you don't have the right mindset, you quickly turn against yourself. It's like, well, this is the image that I projected for this career that I took on or this new venture that I took on. And since I'm not living up to that image, I must be a failure in that sense that I'm not meeting those expectations that I set to myself, or I'm not meeting the expectations of everyone around me that I told, watch me, I'm going to start my own business and I'm going to be successful. That's what makes
Mhm.
it challenging because when you have the courage to step away, you're telling your family, I'm smart enough and I'm experienced enough and I'm confident enough to go and start my own business. And 3 months later, you're like biting your nails on the front porch and they're like, whoa, what happened? You know, I thought you'd be like buying
Yeah.
turkey for the neighborhood by now. You know, so I
Yeah.
guess
Yeah.
these expectations, they become like handcuffs, where all of a
Hmm.
sudden you become almost like a prisoner. I don't want to use the other word, a prisoner of your own ambition, right? Then you have to learn to manage that relationship in front of yourself, in front of your family, in front of all the people that, looking at you as like, wow, this guy is doing his thing, or, this woman is doing her thing. It becomes complicated,
Yeah.
but then
Fast.
fast. And then the ones that push through, right? 3, 5, 10 years, 12, 15, 20 years into it, then you realize it was about the person all along. It was about the person that you were becoming in the process of chasing your dreams. And once you become that person, you can pretty much reinvent yourself how many times you want because you have a model.
It's You're talking about something that was really eye-opening for me when you and I were working together and you were helping me overcome my, baggage, release my baggage from the past
Mm-hmm.
that was holding me back. And you said something that I'll never forget. Now the exact words that you used, I forgot, but but the concept that you were talking about, I won't forget. And you were talking about expectations and how one of the things that really messes with us is this constant striving to meet expectations of other people. In the context of our conversation, we were talking about
Yes,
striving to meet the expectations of other people. Can you just talk a little bit about that?
absolutely. And I'm going to take it a little bit further.
Yeah.
Uh, we're both quote unquote minorities, right? Uh,
Yes.
especially in terms of American society. Um, when you are in the professional world, there are certain things that, depending on what family that you come from, depending on, the kind of environment that you grew up in and the type of people that you had around you, the type of influences that you've had around you, expectations become your reality. And I think people have a hard time separating expectations and their own sense of reality because we become so enveloped, right? We're wrapped up in this world of expectations because minority communities tend to be close, family oriented
Mm-hmm.
communities. That means every single person is in your business, right?
Every single one.
Everybody's in your business. That
Mm-hmm.
means that if you're doing great, it's like amplified. Everybody's talking about it. Not necessarily in the best ways, but everybody's talking about it. And if you're not doing so great, they're there to talk about it as well. So
Oh yeah.
not only do you have to get out there and do whatever it is that you're supposed to do to make it or be successful, you have to balance yourself against these expectations.
Mm-hmm.
That means in order to create that balance, you have to have a clear sense of self, right? The problem is when you come from these really close family structures, it's hard. It's almost impossible to define your own sense of self outside of the fabric of these communities and go out there and forge an identity for yourself. So you're out there looking at yourself like, I'm a minority, the odds are against me. I have to prove myself 10 times more than the others. And then you have to come home and prove yourself to your community that you're not losing yourself, right? So It's a really tough balance to be able to achieve that, managing expectations and at the same time reaching your goals or achieving your idea of success. This is why, to me, and this is not just about minorities, every single person, whatever family you come out of, comes with this set of expectations. Without a strong sense of self and without identifying that why that we were talking about earlier, you can easily get lost.
Mm-hmm.
And you have a really tough time carving a path for yourself to whatever that goal is that you think you're reaching. There's a lot more to it.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it has to come down to that turning the mirror to yourself and ask, really look at yourself like, okay, who am I today? Okay. And why am I doing this again?
Yeah, and to me that is the foundation upon which everything else, your business, related to your business, everything else is built on top of that foundation of self-awareness, self-knowing, and understanding that it's okay to be who you are, to be who you truly are. It's okay to be that. You
It's
have
okay.
the right to
Yes.
you have the right to be who you are, just like everybody else does. As long as you're not hurting anybody.
Exactly. It's okay to be different. It's okay to be weird. It's okay to be ambitious. It's okay. It's okay. It's all okay. As long as you yourself, you're at peace with yourself and the direction that you're choosing without any pressure, without any trying to meet expectations, without trying to avoid, because sometimes it's the other way around, right? Some people have to avoid the script where they come from the type of environment where there's like a script already written for them, where you're supposed to live a certain way, you're supposed to, go after a certain career, you're supposed to be a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer or whatever. Whatever it is, you have to be at peace with yourself. And you have to really find that sense of self, not in, a, I don't like using the word selfish, but I think that word is used like too loosely, right? To say, okay, selfish. But in reality, everything starts with you, right? And whatever it is you set out to do in this world, if you don't do right by you, you're not only going to end up hurting yourself, you hurt other people because the anchor is not there. You're the anchor. Whatever that venture, whatever, the ideas that you have, the project and all that stuff, how far you want to go with it, you are the anchor. Without the anchor, the boat would just be wandering around the oceans and God knows where it's going to end up. You are the anchor. And it's okay to admit that to yourself. It's a big responsibility, but it's okay, especially if you're going to go in the route of entrepreneurship. You have to be able to step forward and say, this is me, and I am the anchor of this new venture.
I'm so glad that you brought up that word selfish. It makes me think about, so one of the things that I do with my clients at the beginning of our journey together is we uncover, because the beginning of my process is your why, your vision,
Mm-hmm.
like why are you doing this? And then it's a self-discovery piece as it relates to your professional behaviors, right? And your
Mm-hmm.
professional preferences, right? And one of the things that we do is we assess their strengths, and it's their character strengths, who you are as a human being,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because no matter what you do in your work, you have to know what strengths you bring to the table as a human, so that you can lean into those strengths and they can be part of the work that you're doing. And when you do
Yes.
that, you gain energy from your work because you're being yourself. You are more creative. You are turned on. You are shining like the brilliant
Mm-hmm.
star that you are. And a lot of times people don't understand, why are we talking about character strengths? Why aren't we assessing my professional strengths? It's like, because you are, like, you, to use your word, the anchor. You
Mm-hmm.
you are a human being operating in this space, whatever it is, corporate world, in your own business. You are the thing that's pulling the levers. You're the one that's making things happen. You're the one that's doing the work, right? So who are you as a human being? Because no matter what we do, we're not an island. We're always working with other people. So what are your strengths, your strengths as a human that you
Mm-hmm.
bring to the table that facilitates your relationships with people, your ability to work with other people, etc. Anyway, that is at the beginning part of the journey. And a lot of times people are doing that kind of self-discovery work for the first time,
Mm-hmm.
and they feel uncomfortable with it. And they use the word selfish. They say that it, like, well, but yes, I am these things, or I do these things, or I demonstrate these behaviors. Yes, these are qualities about me as a human being. But if I were to really lean into them, if I were to really use them, if I were to look for an environment or create an environment myself where I get to do these things,
Mm-hmm.
I feel selfish about that, you know. And the part that takes a little bit of doing, a little bit of talking, a little bit of processing for them to grasp is, no, it like you said, selfish, the way that it's used loosely, carries a negative connotation, and the
Yes.
word does have a negative connotation, but people use that word, and then they think, okay, well, if I am doing what comes naturally to me, or being who I naturally am, then that is selfish, and
Yes.
therefore it's bad, right?
Yes.
And the part that takes a lot of doing for them to get is, no, 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 no. When you lean into these wonderful parts about yourself and use them when you interact with the world, you are bringing a gift to the world, and that's your natural you.
Yes.
These are strengths about who you are as a human being. And can you imagine what the world would look like if more people leaned into their natural, innate wonderfulness as human beings?
Yes.
That's not selfish at all. It is a gift.
Yes. Yes.
We have to be okay with being ourselves as long as we're
yes.
not hurting anybody. We each bring a treasure trove of gifts to this world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's interesting you bring that up because, in my old agency days, we used to interview like high level executives and stuff like that. And, when you put the microphone in front of, a high level executive, they want to, project the best image and the best image of the companies and stuff like that. And I learned a lot from those interviews because they don't realize this, but they all say the same thing. We put our clients first. We do what's best for our clients. We prioritize their needs. We make sure, we take care, we get to know them, and we do everything right by them. And when they say those words, they feel so special saying it. But I've interviewed hundreds of them, and they're all saying the same thing. Who is going to go out there and say we don't put our clients first? Who's gonna go? You know what I mean? What executive is gonna be like, no, we don't really care about our clients. We don't want to save them any money. They all say the same thing, right? What prospect want to hear is what you bring to the table. But the problem is they feel like they're self-promoting, right? Again, self sounds very negative. So they would say, oh, it's all about the client, it's all about the client, it's all about the client. But the client wants to know about you and what you bring to the table and what's unique about you, right? And in a lot of circumstances, especially in the business world, and for any entrepreneurs, you have to be able to embrace the uniqueness of you and what you bring to the table and be able to speak on that.
Mhm.
Because this narrative of
Mhm.
I always do the best for my client, all that stuff, everybody says the same thing. Okay. I don't know who needs to hear this, but you know, just so you know, every single person says the same thing. We put everybody else first. It's all about the client and all that stuff. But the uniqueness of what you bring to the table needs to be highlighted proudly without you feeling like you're being self-centered, selfish, or otherwise, right? Because ultimately, that's what people want from you. Whatever you're doing, I'm sure they can find somebody else that can do it. But they want what you have. They want the essence of you. Yes, how it applies to them and how you can help them with their business, but they want to know what it is that you're bringing to the table. And I believe a lot of times this gets missed because people are shying away from the idea of this is who I am. This is what I'm bringing to the table. This is the reason why. And you wrap it all
Mhm.
together in relation to what it is that you're doing for your clients. And it makes more sense
Mhm.
versus pretty much erasing yourself, but at the same time trying to, expecting people to respond to you when you're literally making yourself invisible in the situation. People need to focus a little more on expressing themselves as authentically as possible.
And understanding themselves in order to be able to do that.
Yes. So in order to do that, you have to understand yourself first, which again, yeah, it's not to be taken
Mhm.
for granted because most people don't really take the time to understand themselves.
Well, so much more to talk about this
Absolutely.
in future episodes. There is so much that we want to dive into. We have a whole list of topics that we want to talk about. So I think for now we've covered a large span of topics. I think that we've gotten into some detail about some of the really important aspects that we wanted to talk about. So anyway, we will expound more in future episodes.
And I think we have a lot more to discuss. And I think these are going to be very interesting conversations. So I would encourage anyone that's out there looking to learn more about what it takes to walk this entrepreneurial journey and do it successfully. And not only that, make sure that you somewhere, somehow find your own sense of self-fulfillment out of it. I think
Mhm.
that's ultimately our goal.
So follow along because there's so much more to discuss, so much that we're going to dive into in a very unscripted, very candid and
Yes,
genuine kind of way, and in an authentic kind of way. So if you like this and you want more, follow along with us. I'm Grisel Scarantino.
I'm Tevi Lawson. Thank
We'll
you
see
for
you next
watching.
time.
We'll see
See
you
you next.
next time.